Out at the ladies' luncheon yesterday, so that made me a bit nervous what I have to do. So anyway, our first speaker in this session boasts a career that spans over 15 years in the professional service at the KPMG, ANZ Banking Group in China, with a specialised focus on ag business. To discuss the very new and very exciting world of e-commerce, which we talked a bit about this morning, would you please welcome the CEO of the Sangha Australia and Director of Australia Meat Processing Corporation, Mr. James Campbell.
Okay. Come on, yep. Okay, I might have to talk fairly loudly here. You got me? All right. What I'd like to... Got the presentation there? No, wrong presentation. Should be the... Before we get the presentation up, this discussion's about e-commerce, the digital road to China, and I think that the question on whether it's the new black, what I'd like to talk about is our strategy that lets you decide whether it's the new black, because I think that our story is one that is actually unfolding. This is very much an as at a point in time. But what I like about this sort of discussion is that we're able to share a real story. This is a case study that's actually ongoing. So I just want to set the scene first because we've been up to a fair bit, particularly over the last year or so, and there are names in this supply chain that you'll recognise, but they all come under what's called the Binderee Beef Group. So I'm going to talk about the Binderee Beef Group. Then I'll talk about some of our drivers, what we're adopting to adapt, if you like. Then we're going to online in China, a place where I spent 4 years. The last 4 years, I've only been back for 7 months in Australia. And then I'll talk to you through the first cut experience and finish up with wins and learns from that ongoing and quite significant experience. So we are a branded, program-driven supply chain. And if nothing else, what we are looking to do is get a producer and a consumer closer together. And to some of David's well-made points today, that's what a supply chain does. What we're doing is focusing on what we're really good at, what we think we're really good at, which is two things. We take a live animal and we put it into a box, but not just a container. We're looking to put as much of a product into a retail pack that sits at eye level in a retail offline supermarket, domestically or internationally, but also importantly on a PC or a smartphone. So here's our supply chain. We have a backgrounding set of assets, about 15 to 25,000 cattle capacity. The Myola feedlot, which has a 20,000 head capacity in the Golden Triangle. Binderee Beef, the big Inverell plant, processes 1,200 cattle a day. That's its capacity. And then we have Sangha. Now I represent Sangha. Sangha in its own right is a significant business. It's a 40-year-old, traditionally commodity trading wholesale business that is now really the tip of the spear. So it's the sales and marketing division of the Binderee Beef Group. But at the same time, we've also got this wonderful business that's been created and built into what represents 50% of the group revenue, which is which comes under our status as the largest non-packer in Australia. So what we've done is we've taken quality assets and we've put them together to create a supply chain. The Australian Meat Emporium is located in Alexandria in Sydney. I strongly encourage you, if you are down there, it's 2 k's from the airport, and it's just terrific. It's where we showcase all our brands. It's a fully operational, largest single retail meat shop in Australia. And then Hungry Hound is a pet food business where we push condemned product down for treats, etc., such as livers. We split the business up into buy, make, sell, and this is just a bit of a drill down into what I just discussed. But we've got our backgrounding assets there. As I said, 15 to 25,000 cattle a year. Myola's a 20,000 head feedlot. We do have plans to expand that in the near future, and I'll talk a little bit about our capital raising. I'm sure many of you are aware of. The make business. This is all about Inverell. We are the 4th largest single processor in Australia. It's a fully integrated processing plant, and we're really all about trying to become much more efficient and really drive a staged CapEx program through the business to really elevate our productivity, our efficiencies, and all-round returns. Something, frankly, that keeps us awake at night and should keep everyone awake at night, certainly in the processing industry, is that it costs us around about $300 to process an animal in Australia. It costs $150 to $200 in the US, and it costs about $100 in Brazil. That's not great for a country like ours that's competing in global markets now, and really, if you take certainly as the Rabo team put together today, that quite interesting research with Brazil now being the largest exporter to China, which is directly competing with certainly the Australian frozen product. And then sell. I mentioned Sanger before. We are located in our key markets, China, the US, the Middle East. And we've got our heavy domestic business with respect to, we supply Aldi, we supply a fairly heavy part of the domestic business through the Sanger trade business, as well as AME, and then the Hungry Hound business. So 60 employees, 6 sales sites, 350 customers in 50 countries. That's what's been built over that period of time with respect to Sanger. And here these businesses are coming together to allow that incorporated supply chain, which is quite compelling in our view. There's been quite a bit of press about the capital raising with Shandong Delisi Group. They will, in the process of finishing this transaction, purchase 45% of the group for $140 million. Shandong Delisi are the 4th largest pork processor in China, and a lot of what David mentioned today resonates quite well with me, both in my past as a banker facilitating acquisition finance for Chinese companies in China, but also now in this role where there is a heavy degree of complementary ability of 2 companies to come together and focus on what both are best at. The distribution capabilities of a business like this is very complementary. China is significant, but it's interesting in China. The Chinese agricultural landscape is a little bit like Australia's in terms of there's only a few major players. And those major players have certainly consolidated very well, and they've aligned themselves to their various distribution channels and networks. And this is a good example of one. When I was at Beef Week and then again in the AMIC conference in the Gold Coast, David McKinnon put together some quite interesting research around some of the the macro trends with respect to the beef industry. And what I'm really pointing to here are some of the drivers that have really come to our attention with respect to our own strategy. This is not theory, this is what's really driving our behaviours and our decisions around what we're looking to do. We want to be customer facing in our key markets. We call that localising in our major markets, and as evidence there, we've got presences in 3 of our markets. And this really comes back to us wanting to be far more closer to our customer, and therein linking a producer closer to a consumer. It's a very, very active part of our strategy to make sure that we are closer to our customers. It's not just about trade relationships. It is in a commodity space, but less so a space that we're looking for. We're driving program business. We're looking for that pull through as opposed to that commodity push through, if that analogy makes sense. Historically, there are certainly examples within the assets in our supply chain where there has been a commodity emphasis. Here's a wall of meat, I need to place that somewhere. What it's now about is this is what the customer wants, or this is what the customer demands. What do we need to do to make sure that we are identifying that raw material and processing it into that product, which is what that customer demands? And that's evolutionary, but that's really where we're focused. And I think to be able to emphasise that certainly is a good segue into the first cut case study, which I'll go through shortly. The 6th point there in terms of used technology, yep. Disruption is upon us. We need to live with it, but we also need to make sure that we're directing it to our advantage, because there are certainly a lot of advantages with respect to that. And then you come down to the other points that we've heard today about provenance, about branding. In China when I was there, it was all about Australia being clean, safe, reliable, traceable. That is absolutely our asset. It really, really is. But as the consumer becomes far more savvy and more developed, as you would expect, they're looking for something beyond that. So let's talk about online. So there's 1.4 billion people in China, give or take, and the Chinese government has a target by 2020 that 1.2 billion, or 85% of that population, are going to have access to 3G and 4G as we know it. Today there's 300 million online shoppers, and there's this little thing, which is what we need to get on. And it's not just about a PC, it's about a smartphone, because do you know 47% of all retail online sales happens through this in China. So if we look at it and we say, okay, there's $40 billion of cross-border consumer e-commerce in China today, which is about 6% of total e-commerce in China. So you call about $600 billion, or over $500 billion of online transactions through e-commerce, and that 40 billion, 6%, that's what we're involved in. It's growing at 50% per year. And for it to grow at 50% per year, there's got to be scalable outcomes. There's got to be products that are going into that. There's got to be activity. So can you imagine how competitive that space is? It's incredible. And it's also, what's interesting is that the fresh food, or fresh they call it, they refer to it as fresh, that's in the top 3 fastest growing areas of e-commerce in China. And I actually think it's number 1 now, and that's where our first cut is. So this is not about shotgunning China. This is about trying to be very, very strategic and place a product in what is an incredibly wide market and a growing market with respect to government emphasis on tricking up that population with respect to technology. And I know these numbers are, look, they're just numbers, they're big numbers, but whether that's the exact number, I got that from McKinsey, who I find are terrifically reliable with respect to their research. But another point there that, you know, by 2018, we're looking at that online business in China being incredibly significant relative to and eclipsing the total the total online trade in two of the most developed countries in the world. Okay, so it's big. One of the facts of life with respect to China, and why I put this as a separate slide, is that there's a constant effort to get ahead over there, particularly in the online space. And so what we see is a heavy use of discounting to win volume on price. And we've experienced that too in our own situation. Well, particularly because our product is a fresh product, and it goes in with a shelf life, and if it, depending on what the environment looks like, we may have to discount it at times. But that's a fact of life. That's not a, oh gee, you mustn't be going to. Well, you're discounting. It's because it's sitting there with a number of other products. Online operators view the system as being able to cut out certain middlemen, and that's successful to a point. But what's so important is that we're able to keep our logistics and our loop closed, particularly for a product such as first cut. So let's talk about first cut. I was actually quite pleased when the Rabo gent put up his slide, and first cut was there in the centre, some of the shin shank, and I don't think he did it on purpose, but you know, here we are. So first cut is the only fresh chilled retail product packed in Australia, sitting online in China today. It was the result of a significant amount of market research that followed a delegation tour led by the then Trade Minister Andrew Robb. At that time I was working with ANZ, and I remember the session that we were all in when Tim Sullivan, who works with me at Sanger, saw this concept at JD.com and ran with it. It was launched in December 2015 with a company called JD.com that has a very significant market share in its own right. Its scale is obviously very compelling in terms of a $47 billion US market cap. They have 54% of the online retail market, and they're running about 42 million SKUs across around 30 warehouses around China, and growing. So we looked at that and we said, why? Well, it's sort of glossed over now, but rising middle class, elevated incomes, rural-urban shift. And then we looked at the constraints such as dietary habits, personal incomes, the rising prices of red meat. Also, red meat in China is very different to the States or here, where we would say that it competes with chicken and pork. In China, chicken and pork are staples, particularly pork. Pork's the rice of protein, if you like, in China. So we look at beef in China as being a specialty item, and then with what we're putting into that market, in a retail pack has been what we call premium. Okay. So the traditional drivers are important, but there are markets within markets. And I look at China, I guess I can deduct from the time I spent in China, as it's been a little bit like the European continent, but even then, drill down further. Shanghai has 25 million people in it, Chongqing's got 32. Within those cities, there are ecosystems themselves, and absolutely no way is a country like Australia going to be able to service a city in China, let alone Southeast Asia, as some of the food bowl commentary started to think about, but then has obviously corrected itself with respect to where we can actually play with our clean, safe, reliable and traceable product. So we're looking for the high income earner. We've gone in for a chilled product versus the traditional frozen. Frozen's certainly a lot easier to handle. It's a lot easier to store, and also you've obviously got a longer shelf life, up to a year or so before you need to do something about it. We led first cut with safety. You can see by the pack it looks quite sterile, and that's very purposeful. A lot of research went into how the pack could look. And when you're selling a premium product like this, that style of simplicity with the gold down the side, won't go into a marketing exercise, and I'm certainly not the person to provide you a marketing lesson, but a lot of work went into creating that pack on how it is. The other thing we get out of JD and an online environment is we get access to big data. And these big companies, such as JD.com and Tmall and Alibaba, what they have is they're now able to sell big data on what's happening and what the sales are with respect to all of their products. And that's very, very enriching for companies to know what consumer behaviours are matching the products that they have available. And so being able to understand and access big data is certainly an advantage, particularly in that growing online market. So the partnership, well, we partnered with JD to develop the brand exclusively online. We launched with an Australia steak, imperial steak, beef strips and beef fingers, and more recently we've added shin shank and brisket. It's on strategy, and I think this is coming back to that question, is it the new black? Well, it works in with our strategy, and it's certainly not for the faint-hearted, and it's not without its risk, but it works for our provenance, our brand, our program-driven, China being a priority market. It's not the only priority market, but it's a priority market for us. So it matched what we are doing as a business. I talked about the safety first being quite key, and this really talks to Authenticate IT, which is a company that has enabled us to track a barcode on the first cut pack back to the batch, which is scanned on the hour at the plant. So we can't go back to the specific animal, but we can go back within an hour of the processing being done and packed in the modified air pressure room that we pack the product in Inverell. And that's very, very important to the Chinese. There's a few photos I thought might be interesting. When we launched this, it was launched in quite an intimate environment. We had key opinion leaders from China that were hand-selected to come in, and they may have 10,000, 20,000, 2,000 WeChat followers. WeChat sits on, it's the Chinese Facebook, if you like. It's a quick messenger service. You can do anything on it. There's 600 million users of WeChat. First Cut's on WeChat. It's got its own page. Again, we're trying to get on people's smartphones. In the bottom right corner there, you can see the board we used, the plate, which was actually set up to hold an iPhone on it like this, so that they could take a photo of their food and send it on. And as you know, the Chinese are quite interested in taking photos. And we had a key leading chef talk us through all the menus. So it's a bit like a degustation process. There's a bit more of the plate, and I didn't take those photos, but it sure looks good, and it really was. These are some of the digital examples we have. So we talked through the websites, and this has taken a long time to get right. And as I said, we're on a journey. We're not there yet, but it's a story. You know, First Cut's a story. There's videos. There's I talked about the WeChat page. There's JD.com. There's a lot of interaction that goes with this program in building up a premium brand in China. I would mention certainly our partners. You can't do it without partners, but you know, certainly in this forum, I would single out the MLA as being, you know, absolutely fantastic with us. Richard Norton has not got me on the payroll to say this, but they really were terrific, and they afforded us a hell of a lot of time and resource to be able to get this going. Okay, wins and learns. We did not do this perfectly at all, and it is still not perfect. We're selling online, and it is selling. It's actually moving. Our first mover advantage is intact, and that still maybe suggests that we're a little bit crazy because no one else has jumped in on the chilled product. What we're getting that is so encouraging is exceptional customer feedback, because this is an experience for customers. I talked about that producer-consumer closer together. What we're getting is the customer experience in a live feed, if you like, and we just need more. The partnership with JD.com is strong. They're very, very helpful, they're very encouraging, and they believe in the product. And it's interesting, because we've done this, and we haven't done a roadshow telling this story outside of maybe 2 conferences, but new business has flowed from the experience. So we're creating new business as we go, because people are genuinely interested in the experience, and certainly as they understand the Binderee story, we're able to execute. The learns, I would say we did the hard bits really well, and some of the easy bits we just took for granted. But in China, it's all hard. There are no easy bits. Our content and marketing is now our focus. What we're doing now is we're driving our story, we're elevating our story, and we're trying to get out beyond our starting gate with respect to marketing and media content. And that's a process in itself, and it's not inexpensive either. I think, to be honest, at the start, we felt that the platform itself would be a form of marketing that would probably offset the degree of marketing we'd normally do, and that was a mistake. The platform is a platform. It's like a supermarket shelf. It is on our onus to do the marketing ourselves and drive it ourselves. So we are a little behind in that. Certainly the difference in consumer online and consumer offline is very different. We knew that, and I think we got it relatively right. Some of the products aren't selling as well as others, but offline tends to be the traditional cuts, such as a shin shank and a brisket. And then online, you get a younger consumer, that, you know, the upper middle class executive or increasingly well-paid individual who's looking for that quick, you know, ready to cook steak, oyster, beef strips, etc. So, you know, where our market mix and product mix is still being worked through, and every day it's probably a bit like adjusting the steering wheel when you're driving a car. We're still trying to get that exactly right, and we're complementing this with offline programs on First Cut too. So we went on to online, and now we're pushing offline with an umbrella process to to drive that awareness and things. And there's certainly not the awareness that there needs to be with respect to chilled versus frozen and the benefits within that. So obviously being a first mover has its challenges. we really believe in this product. We've got some terrific people around us that continue to believe in the product. As I said, it's moving, it's selling. We're continuing to pack it, and we're just going through that next stage after that first 3 months of life online in China. So I'd like to thank you for listening. I know it's been a bit of a change of gear from perhaps the rest of the day, but you know, that's our story, and that's an example of the style of program, the style of brand-driven innovation that Bindaree Beef Group's looking to attack and grow on the back of. So, thank you very much.